In the history of Europe, the Middle Ages, also known as the medieval period, lasted from the 400s to the 1400s. The land was divided very differently than it is today. The Middle Ages was a really difficult time to live. Most people lived under the feudal system where there would be a local lord who lived in a large house called a manor or a castle. That person would have local peasants living in huts on their land who would work for the lord, and the peasants acted like servants who did back-breaking work. The life for a person back then was hard and often short. Sudden and premature death was common in the medieval period, and people would often die from different causes. Life expectancy at birth was only 33 years, and the biggest danger was surviving childhood. Even if you were wealthy, it did not guarantee a long life. Because of short lifespans and such difficult lives, people really relied on their religion. The religion at the time across Europe was the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church was very wealthy and often had more power than kings. Through this wealth, the Catholic Church was able to have and create many things that the common people didn't have access to. One of those things is the written word. Only the very wealthy people and men who devoted their lives to the Catholic Church, called monks, knew how to read and write. There was not very much written work, like books or manuscripts, in the medieval times because there was no inexpensive way of creating them. They were so expensive because of the cost of labor involved in copying them out by hand and the very special paper needed to write on. Manuscripts and books were written on specially treated animal skins, usually goat, called parchment or vellum. Paper made from plant fibers did not become common in Europe until about 1450, right around the time of the printing press. One type of animal skin that was commonly used in very nice, fancy manuscripts is calf skin because it created an extra smooth surface to write and draw on. The most common covering for one of these manuscripts is leather. Most bookmakers in the Middle Ages were monks, and monasteries, where they lived, kept libraries filled not only with sacred texts like the Bible, but also with literary, scientific, and philosophical works by Greek and Roman authors. Multi-volume Bibles and huge liturgical books were housed and used in churches. Only the very wealthy could afford to have their own books written and illustrated for their own personal libraries. Monks were trained to write manuscripts and to add interesting decorations to the pages. Because the writing was all very formal and didn't get divided into paragraphs, monks would draw what is called illuminated letters that would serve as a page marker. An illuminated letter was usually the first letter of a page or a paragraph, which was always enlarged and in color. In most cases, gold was also applied in the areas, and the rest of the text remained black. Very ornate books would also have illuminated borders, as well as different images inspired by the story. The Book of Kells is one of the most famous and most decorative examples of illuminated manuscript that we have in the world. Of its 680 surviving pages, only 2 have no decoration at all. Some pages were completely decorated with only a single line of text. Here is an incredibly complex design using the letter P, where you need a magnifying glass to see the detail. We think the Book of Kells was probably produced in a monastery on the Isle of Iona, Scotland, to honor St. Columba in the early 8th century. After a Viking raid, the book was moved to Kells, Ireland, sometime in the 9th century. It was stolen in the 11th century, at which time its cover was torn off and it was thrown into a ditch. The cover, which most likely included gold and gems, has never been found, and the book suffered some water damage. But otherwise, it is extraordinarily well preserved. In 1541, the book was taken by the Roman Catholic Church for safekeeping and was returned to Ireland in the 17th century, and an archbishop gave it to Trinity College in Dublin, where the book is today. Because every book was handwritten and hand-drawn, there are different versions of the same book. Each monk decided what and how he would draw on each page. It is clear that monks had different styles, and some were more realistic in their drawings, and some were, shall we say, less realistic. Sometimes mistakes were made, and you can even find the accidental omission of words or misspellings of words. There's even an Italian manuscript that has the paw prints of a cat that walked through the ink and walked across the manuscript. Even centuries ago, cats were walking all over people's stuff. Here are several illuminated letters in different styles from all over Europe. You'll notice the designs in and around the letter can be anything from humans to animals to fancy creatures like dragons or monsters or unicorns, to fruits, flowers, vines, and Celtic knots. Now let's talk about fonts. The style of a letter is called the font. Some fonts are very simple and basic, while others are very ornate and difficult for us to recognize. Very simple fonts are called sans serif. Sans is French for without. Here's an example of a sans serif letter. A serif is decoration to the simple letter on the ends to make it easier to distinguish the letters from each other or to make it more ornate. There are dozens of types of serifs, and they each create a unique style to the font. Here's the capital H with some of the serifs added to it so you can see what they look like when you add different versions. Some look very modern. Some look like old Western writing. Some look old-fashioned. Some look formal. Some look informal or designer. Another option besides adding a serif is to add curls or loops, making the font look very similar to cursive, like these. And then you can mix and match like these fonts. I want you to go ahead and grab your illuminated letter ideas, your various serif styles, and the different fonts. You can find these pages on the link in the description of this video. I want you to go ahead and pick a letter, any letter that you want out of the alphabet, and I want you to write it in a sans serif style, so very simple block letter. My first letter is going to be a B, and you need to make sure that you do it really carefully and that all parts of your B are the same thickness. Now pick a serif you want to use. I'm going to go ahead and use this wedge serif, and I'm going to try to make it look exactly like it is on the paper, and you'll notice that there are 2 points on a B, and so you would add a serif on both points, the top and the bottom. To finish it off, go ahead and erase the little parts of the B so that it looks like a complete letter. And voila! Now try another letter. Now here is the letter R. I did the same thing. Start with a sans serif letter, a big block R, and then pick a serif. I'm going to use the Tuscan serif. Now this one's kind of fun. I have 3 parts that I can use the Tuscan serif on. So this top, the bottom, and I can flip the paper upside down. You should go ahead and flip your paper upside down too to make sure that you are seeing it properly so you get it drawn correctly. And keep going. Now the point of this A makes it kind of exciting because it acts like 2 points. So I'm going to take the Gothic serif and draw a serif for each side. You can go ahead and decorate your letter even more and change the style. Here I am creating an angled bar across my A, adding the serif. Now try to go ahead and copy one of the other fonts. Pick a letter that you like and go ahead and try to copy it. Start off with your sans serif letter, your block letter, and add the decorative serifs. You'll also notice that some parts of the letter are very thin while others are very thick, so be sure to try to follow those as well. These can be more tricky because they're more decorative. They don't follow the rules of a normal serif, but give a few a try. Now let's try it a little more fancy, adding extra ornate parts to the letters, like these. Now in this case I've made the I look like a column, so I'm going to go ahead and add a vine to make it even more fancy, or a ribbon. So go ahead and give this a try as well. Try to make it look like the ribbon is curving around your column. Also think about how you can play with the bits of your letter. Like here in the letter A, the center bar is being kind of changed around to look more like a V, making it more decorative. So think about ways that you might be able to do this in your own letters. Now think of items that start with the letter that you're choosing. I chose my last letter B for my final art piece. So I'm choosing items that start with a B, like a bird, or a bubble, or a bunny. Once you have your letter chosen, grab a piece of white cardstock and a ruler. Line up the edge of your ruler with the edge of the paper on each side and draw a line straight down so you have a border. In the center of the large rectangle, draw your chosen letter. When you draw your letter, it'll look good if part of your serif is hanging over the border. Choose an item for each corner and make each corner the same. In this case, it's a B in each corner. Now add more embellishment to your letter, like vines or architectural details. It's optional, but here you can add one of your items or several of your items perched on or surrounding your letter. In this case, it's a bird and a butterfly, but you might have a dragon wrapped around or flowers around or fruit placed in there. It's really up to your imagination and your creativity. The coloring technique we're using for this project is called layering and burnishing. This is a good way to mix colors and end in a shiny, waxy finish instead of a rough and often less vibrant finish. Any colors can be blended together this way. In the circle is a warm purple and a blue. Start with one color, often the darker color, and color in the area you want it to be in. Use the most pressure in areas you want that pure color. Ease the pressure you're coloring with where you're ready to blend. Then come in with the second color and do the same, continuing layering this way until you achieve the blend you like. Using the lighter color, color over the blended area with a lot of pressure. You should have a waxy, shiny layer of color pencil. Here I'm going to use that technique on a flower using deep blue, dark blue, and light blue. And here is the flower completed. For the same effect, but going into pastels or white, use the same technique, but very little pressure in the areas to be blended to white. For this, you use white as the burnishing color. Here is the same flower using the technique with white. You can see the difference in color. Here I'm using white on top of the blue burnished flower, and you can see it doesn't make much difference. It is difficult to lighten a color once it is already burnished. Here I'm adding white on top of the circle, and you can see that reburnishing it with white doesn't do much to lighten it. Now let's go ahead and do a circle without much pressure in the blending and burnish it with white. And you can see that that will result in a lighter color. Now apply this burnishing technique to your entire picture. Every single object needs to be done using the burnishing technique. Do the background and all the items. Leave your letter plain. We are going to paint that with a very shiny metallic color. You'll be able to choose between gold or copper or silver and rose gold, depending on what works best with the colors that you chose. In the large rectangle behind your letter, you're going to apply a different technique. You're going to choose a colorful Sharpie marker and a complementing color pencil. With the Sharpie marker, you're going to create an interesting texture. This one is with curly cues, and fill the entire rectangle with that texture. Once you have done that in every single little spot in between all of your objects, you will then color in on top of it with the color pencil, and you're going to press hard so you have a burnishing technique using only one color. Now pick any metallic paint. You can use gold or copper, rose gold, silver, really any color that you can find that has a metallic finish. With some brands, you will need to use several layers to get the proper effect. Work carefully to try to stay inside the borders, but don't worry too much because you can always go back over your Sharpie marker again and it'll work out just fine.